Hello, and welcome to Trek in Time, the podcast that takes a look at Star Trek in order and in history. What we're doing here is we're taking a look at the episodes in chronological order, which means that at this point, we've started with Enterprise. And we're also taking a look at where these episodes fell in our time, meaning what was in the headlines at the time the show originally aired. We're also going to take a deeper dive into the episodes and take a look at the episodes themselves from a critical perspective, kind of nitpicking at times, but we're nerds, so that's what we do. And who are these nerds? Well, I'm Sean Farrell. I'm a writer. I'm a novelist and picture book author. And with me is my brother Matthew. He's the tech guru and inquisitor behind the YouTube channel Undecided with Matt Farrell, which takes a look at emerging tech and its impact on our lives. Say hi, Matt.
Hello.
Today we're going to be talking about episode 8 of Star Trek Enterprise. This is Breaking the Ice. This is directed by Terry Windell, and it aired on November 7th, 2001. It was viewed by 7.36 million people. What was the world like when this episode aired, you wonder, Matthew? Let me tell you, you'll never guess what the number one song was.
Could it be the same song that's been there every week?
It's Alicia Keys' Fallen.
There we go.
Little teaser for our listeners. Tune in next week when we finally have a different song.
What?
I know. It's very exciting. We've also had a string on again, off again of number one movies that have left us, in some cases, scratching our heads as we say, what movie is that? I don't remember that. This week, again, another head scratcher. What is this movie they're talking about? They're talking about Monsters, Inc.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was the number one movie. It broke Toy Story 2's record of 57.4 million for the highest weekend debut in November for an animated film, a G-rated film, and for the holiday season. It also broke How the Grinch Stole Christmas's record for the highest weekend debut for a non-sequel, The Lion King for highest weekend debut for a non-sequel animated film, and this surprised me, it broke Independence Day's record for the highest weekend debut for an original film overall.
Wow.
So a little bit of a window into how the scale of money making in a movie was really different in 2001. When you think about what opening weekends looked like for Avengers Endgame, for example.
Yeah.
Which is just numbers that boggle the mind compared to this. But this was considered a tremendous success, obviously, because it is Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
Easily one of my favorite Pixar films.
It's a classic. It's absolutely classic.
Also this week, among television competition for Enterprise, a little show called ER was the number one show that week. And as I just mentioned, this episode, Breaking the Ice of Enterprise, had 7.36 million viewers, and ER had to struggle along with only 26.85 million.
Slightly different scale.
Slightly different scale.
Yeah.
3 times as many, a little more than 3 times as many people watching. And that is a winnowing viewership. The 7.36 million is less than last week, which was less than the week before. At this point, Enterprise has been losing viewers consistently, week by week. Understandable, given the era that the show premiered in, as we've been talking about up to this point. This is a very close to 9/11, post 9/11 world that Enterprise appeared in, which creates for the weird juxtaposition of the idealistic future and how they are envisioning humanity coming together, while among the headlines on the New York Times are stories about how President Bush is appealing to Europe to face the reality that Osama bin Laden was seeking nuclear arms. And the FBI was struggling to figure out who was behind the anthrax scare. The major news story for the day that this episode aired was actually about the election of Bloomberg as mayor in New York City, beating Green in I remember, kind of contentious election because Giuliani at that point still had the favor of New York City. New York City's mayor during 9/11, he was going out with high popularity, being seen as a strong leader in a tragic event, and he was heavily endorsing Bloomberg at that point. So now into the episode, Breaking the Ice. Matt, do you want to give us a synopsis of this episode?
Sure. Enterprise encounters a comet. Lieutenant Reed and Ensign Mayweather stop to mine some Elysium on that comet. And to their surprise, the Vulcan ship Timur stops to observe the Enterprise. And meanwhile, Commander Tucker unexpectedly becomes the only crewman to learn that Sub-Commander T'Pol has to make a decision between staying aboard the Enterprise or returning to Vulcan for her impending marriage. And she asks for his advice.
This episode, a couple of quick side notes. This was the first episode not scripted by producers Braga and Berman, which I think is interesting that it took us this many episodes to get to the point where they were not directly hands-on with the script. And I think it's notable. I think it's something you can notice in some of the interactions between some of the characters, and the interjection of some humor in ways that it hasn't been present previously.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that there's a shift in tone.
Not that Braga and Berman don't know how to write. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying there is as Matt just said, the tone. There is a subtle shift, even in moments of tension. So into the plot we go. This episode takes place probably sometime in late June or early July of 2151. We, of course, are prior to the evolution of star dates within the Star Trek universe. So we actually have calendar dates according to the accepted Earth calendar. And strangely, some episodes, I don't know why, but some episodes have a known specific date, and other episodes are just unknown. So it's a best guess. The last episode that we talked about took place in June of 2151. The next episode takes place in mid-July 2151. So that puts us somewhere around maybe July 4th. So the Enterprise is investigating a comet, and Sub-Commander T'Pol learns that the comet contains Elysium. It's a rare mineral, which Vulcan chemists have not previously studied in detail. And the crew quickly decides that they're going to take advantage of this new discovery and send an away team. They discuss the idea of being able to beam Elysium out of the comet, but it is too deep in the comet, so they will actually have to mine for it.
This is also in the setup is also they kind of keep hammering home on that idea that the Vulcans just aren't very curious, because during the debate of whether they should be going down there or not, T'Pol brings up once again of humans and Vulcans have studied thousands of comets already. Like, why do you want to do this?
Raising the question of what's the point?
And Archer's response was, but none of them have been this big. It was just like, there's always something interesting to learn from, and just curiosity. It's hammered home again and again over the past several episodes.
And I believe Mayweather makes the little joke, but it's not a joke, referring to it as Archer's Comet. This is, the humans aboard the Enterprise are clearly viewing this as we're beginning to plant our flag in various places. They even make a joke about planting a flag on the comet. So Mayweather and Reed are going to be the away team that is going to take a shuttle down to the comet. And meanwhile, the Vulcan starship Timur arrives, Captain Vanek in charge, and they have a chilly back and forth with Vanek basically saying, we're just here to watch you.
Yeah.
Archer is, meanwhile, not happy. He has gotten the sense that the Vulcans are basically following them around, observing them, and it's raising his hackles. It's very evident that this is a personal affront, as opposed to, this doesn't tie directly back to the Andorian incident, which dealt
it's related to it.
Spying. But that was my question to you. Do you think there was just enough of a tension there, or do you think it should have been a more direct line to, we know the Vulcans have a history of spying and going where they're not wanted?
I don't think that they had to make it more obvious, because watching these episodes, it seems plain as day of, here's the previous episode, the humans just exposed a major listening post of the Vulcans spying on the Andorians. So now the humans are not just out there kind of flitting about doing their own weird things. They're actually starting to impact Vulcans. And so now the Vulcans are probably like, we got to keep a closer eye on them because they're kind of screwing things up for us. So it made perfect sense to me that they didn't have to like explicitly come out and say it. But since the last episode to this one, they've said, Archer basically said, we keep bumping into them now. And so it's like, it's clear why they are, because the Vulcans are taking more of an active role in watching them to make sure that the humans don't screw up any more of their things.
So there's this icy conversation where Archer basically says, okay, if you're not going to help, we're not going to try and run you off, but just stay out of our way, basically. While the operation's going on around, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. This episode almost felt like it didn't have intersecting and parallel storylines. It felt like there was a lot happening aboard the ship. In some cases, kind of free from the other storylines. So it's a little bit like a day in the life, as opposed to just an A storyline and a B storyline that inform and cross each other, which is an interesting storytelling that at first I didn't quite like, that the storylines didn't fully intersect. But then at a certain point I was like, it's adding a lot of flavor that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I have a big note for myself about this exact thing of, I'm torn because overall, I don't think I liked the episode. And part of the reason for that is it was a whole nothing burger. Like, there really was no plot. It was just very kind of meandering, and it was excellent character development. Like, some of the best character development they've had in any episode. And for that, I'm like, awesome. It's like, I feel like I've learned a lot about T'Pol and Archer and Tucker and even the relationship with the Vulcans. It's like they dumped a whole bunch of character stuff on us, but they did it in a way that was not interesting to me. It was just like, I needed more of a through line. I wanted more of a bigger thread that I could hold on to through the episode. And the fact that these disparate storylines, we're going to talk about this, they never really intertwine ever in the episode. It's like the T'Pol storyline has no relation to really what's going on. Right. The Archer and the students storyline doesn't tie really into anything at all. And it's like the Merryweather on the Comet is like, that doesn't tie into anything at all. Well, sort of barely, but it's just like the fact that none of them tied together at the end, I thought was bad. So for me, the episode was a disappointment, even though I really loved the writing and I loved the character development. So it's like, I'm really torn on this episode.
Yeah, it seems like the intersections are glancing at best.
Yeah.
Like we'll jump forward to discuss the classroom interaction, which is a nice nugget in the story. I like the fact that the Enterprise is, of course, getting classroom mail, and which includes drawings from students and questions around, like, how do you live in space? What is the spaceship like? I liked all of that. It made sense that it would happen. It only tangentially touches on the main storyline around T'Pol's life, when one of the questions is, can people date aboard the Enterprise? And Archer's somewhat stumbling answer is, well, there's no restrictions against it, but space is at such a bare minimum here. There's no such thing really as privacy. And people trying to interact and have a personal life is going to be hard given those circumstances. That is the only rub against the T'Pol storyline, which is effectively, she is betrothed. Nobody else knows it. She wants to carry that close to the vest. And Vulcans, with the sense of privacy and propriety that they carry with them, they end up sending an encrypted message to the ship that, when it is intercepted, given all the history, and again, I raised the question of, should they have drawn a more direct line? I think if there had been a line from Archer saying something to Paul along the lines at the beginning of the episode is, we all know that the Vulcans like to spy. Then the intercepted communication is more clearly loaded. It's seen as questionable in the episode, but I think it could have been seen as more of a, do we have a spy in our midst? Sort of, if it had been tied in differently. And I don't know exactly how they could have made the classroom communication more directly cross, other than if it had been done in the form of an ongoing dialogue of Archer, almost in the form of a captain's log, going back and revisiting his communication with the classroom. There could have been a wrap up at the end of him coming back and saying, sometimes things aren't what we expect.
Right.
Reaching out to the classroom and saying, our life aboard Enterprise is having to evolve and adapt. We are learning we have to adapt because we expect things and then we don't get what we expect. It could have reflected on his personal experience of having been told by Trip, this thing between me and T'Pol, it's private. And Archer's moment of coming full circle to the earlier comment about privacy is difficult aboard the Enterprise could have been brought full circle into that communication back to the classroom.
Right. But they didn't do that. That's
But they don't do that.
That's why I'm torn on this episode. It's because they never pull the stuff together. It's just different storylines that just, like you said, glancing blows with each other, which is just really, really, really disappointing. And the whole T'Pol Tucker storyline I really enjoyed, and it's clearly laying down groundwork for what's going to happen between the two of them in the coming episodes and seasons, because it's the root of their relationship, and how she made the comment of, you were not the first choice of the person I would talk to about this, but I don't want to introduce somebody else to my private information, and you already know it because you spied on me. So she's basically, I'm just going to talk to you because it's convenient. But clearly that actually is the seed of, there actually is a growing trust between the two of them.
Yeah. And to get into the details of that plot point.
Yeah.
The Vulcan ship sends an encrypted message to T'Pol, and Commander Tucker intercepts it. And then Archer orders Sato to decrypt it. Tucker is the only one to actually read it. Sato is able to decrypt it, but she does not take a look at it because in her mind, she's like, this is encrypted and personal for a reason. I don't need to take a look at it if you're going to. So Tucker reads it and he learns that it's not a message about the crew or the ship or anything other than her personal life. It's about her arranged marriage. Tucker goes to T'Pol, and I really like the conversation between Tucker and T'Pol, but I also like the conversation between Tucker and Archer before he goes to T'Pol, where he basically says, I feel like I owe it to her to let her know that this was looked at.
Yeah.
There's a sense of honesty and honor, and he feels like it would jeopardize his relationship with her, and sense of trust. And Archer really respects that. I think that that's a nice character moment between the two of them. So Tucker goes to T'Pol. He apologizes for having read it, and they have a little bit of a back and forth where she's insulted, but she clearly is disturbed by this message. There's a nice scene between her and Phlox where she's complaining about having trouble sleeping. She doesn't depict it as, I'm having trouble sleeping. She simply says, I'm not sleeping. And Phlox very gingerly, but also very nicely says, you're going through stress. This is all stress related, the headaches, the lack of sleep. You need to talk to somebody. You can talk to me, of course, or perhaps there's somebody else you can confide in. And that's when she goes back to Tucker. And she talks about the tension between her betrothed would mean that she would have to return to Vulcan and leave the Enterprise. And Trip's entire argument against it is effectively, that's not how we humans would do it. And arguing for, what do you want? And this is a consideration that she has not ever made. Her description of Vulcan culture is that everything is of and for the heritage of the Vulcan culture. The individual does not matter. It's an interesting depiction because we're accustomed to Vulcans in the future who make all sorts of personal choices, most notably Mr. Spock, who at one point it's revealed that he could have gone to the Science Academy, the Vulcan Science Academy. He chose Starfleet instead. And that is one of the schisms between him and his father.
Yeah.
So we're already accustomed to a Vulcan who is willing to say, like, I'm going to follow my heart as opposed to some sort of expectation, cultural expectation. To see somebody who predates that, she is not accustomed to any Vulcan doing this. No Vulcan at this point is depicted as anything close to having a personal identity separate from the collective. And I think that one of the nice things in this episode is actually a depiction of Captain Vanek. What did you think of Vanek?
I thought his portrayal was awesome. It's like I loved just the complete disdain he has for humans. He has zero interest in it, and because he's a Vulcan, he doesn't hide it at all. It's just like, I don't care about you. I'm not here to small talk. I'm not here to hang out. I'm not here to learn about you because I find you boring. And what's the point? And just his complete, just honest, just brutally honest, just whatever.
Yeah,
dude.
You're referring, of course, to the dinner party,
yes.
which is the breaking the ice moment. There's two breaking the ices in the show. There's, of course, the breaking the ice between the Vulcans and the humans, and there's also the breaking of the ice on the Comet. As you may have gotten the sense that Matt and I are talking a lot about the interpersonal relationships, the back and forth between the characters. We haven't really talked a whole lot about what's going on the Comet.
Because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter.
Let's cut to the chase. Everything that happens on the Comet is really kind of it's not even secondary. It's tertiary. It's
a MacGuffin.
And at a certain point by the end of the episode, it's just bad. And I'll get to why as we get to that point. But at this point, there's the dinner party. They have Captain Vanek over for dinner where Archer is trying to extend an olive leaf and say, like, let's at least be friendly if we can't be friends. And Vanek's response is to show up to dinner and say, I already ate.
Mm-hmm.
Engages in no small talk, even when asked direct questions about what's your personal life like, how long have you been captain, and chit chat around different types of Vulcan ships. And he's like, why are we talking about this? So the dinner party comes to a screeching halt. I really appreciated that he leaves with a quick turn of Vulcan phrase to T'Pol, and we never learn
find out what it is.
What he said. The subtext, based on previous episodes where other Vulcans have said to T'Pol, how do you handle the smell?
Yeah.
He could very well be saying, like, this place smells like crap.
Or how do you put up with this nonsense?
How do you put up with this nonsense?
Yeah.
And T'Pol in that moment, you get the sense there's a very subtle, and this is where Jolene Blaylock's portrayal of T'Pol, I think she does a really nice job with a character similar to all the better actors who've portrayed Vulcans. She's able to do a lot of subtle things. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to have an undercurrent in your acting, and it's something that Martin Landau was originally offered the role of Spock, and he turned it down, but referred the producers to his friend Leonard Nimoy. And Landau said afterward, only after he saw Nimoy's portrayal of Spock did he realize that this wasn't an emotionless character. This was a character who was nothing but emotion. It just couldn't be on the surface.
Yep.
And that he'd missed an opportunity. And I think that Blaylock is doing something similar here. There's that sense of embarrassment through the dinner party that I think is really well done. She portrays that tone of, I both agree with the Vulcan understanding of small talk is pointless.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's looking at this captain with a sense of, like, do you really have to be this way? Do you really, like, they're trying to do something. Can't you meet them halfway?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she also has we've talked about this before. There's a secondhand nature between all the characters already in the show. And so, like, she clearly respects the captain. She respects Tucker. She respects the crew, even though she doesn't understand the human way of doing things. So, like you said, there's that undercurrent of embarrassment because she doesn't want her species to be disrespecting these people that she likes. And so it's kind of like this, she's stuck between a rock and a hard place in that scene. And she does a really good job portraying that in a very Vulcan way. I thought it was very good.
So as the dinner party comes to an end, Archer basically accuses the Vulcans of spying on them and says, you need to leave, even having the Vulcan captain escorted off the ship, which I thought was a very telling moment.
Yeah.
And Meanwhile, this is the point in the episode where the Comet finally crosses paths with the Vulcan storyline. And it's, like I said, the Comet storyline is forgettable and unnecessary. It has some moments that are clearly meant to be charming humor that just come across as kind of goofy at times. Reed and Mayweather, to give a very quick summary, they arrive on the Comet in a shuttle pod. They build a snowman. They give it Vulcan ears. They lay a bunch of charges, and then they blow up the charges in order to get deep enough to be able to get to the ore that they're looking for. It's at this point that the ship registers that the explosion has changed the axis of the Comet, and the location where the shuttle pod has landed and where the crew is excavating the material is now going to rotate into direct line of the sun, and the temperature is going to skyrocket.
Can I just pause you right there for a second?
Yeah.
We're in
you and I,
20,
at this point, you and I are going to be able to
yes,
pick this part apart for probably, I'm going to give us a goal of being done in less than 5 minutes, but I think we could probably go for an hour.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
We're in 2021, and scientists today would know when you blow something up on the side of a comet, it's going to change the trajectory of the comet. It's going to, it's going to cause it to spin in a different way. It's going to cause it to do something. That's something probably a kindergartner could tell you. And the fact that Mayweather just puts these things in there without any kind of, forethought, and they blow it up. And it's like, did nobody think that this is going to have an impact on how this thing is traveling through space? Is just beyond stupid. And it's just so dumb that they were caught by surprise, that it changed the orientation of the spin. It's going to put them into the front where they're going to be exposed to the star, which is going to change the heat of the comet, which is going to cause it to crack and open up. It's like that part of it is like very authentic and true and scientifically accurate, but the stupidity that they didn't plan ahead is just laughable. It's like they're further in T'Pol is their science officer, for God's sake. It's like here you've got a culture that's 30 years in advance of us. They have better technology. They clearly know science, and then they have a Vulcan on board their ship that's even further ahead. So it's like, you can't tell me that their science officer would have said, "Hey, Mayweather, make sure that you plant those charges in this kind of way to affect the orientation so it spins this direction instead of that direction." It's like they would have planned ahead for this. It's so stupid. Dumb.
I think it's even worse than that, because all they're doing is effectively what science crews in Antarctica do today.
Yeah.
They dig for deep samples of stuff.
Yeah, they bore.
And the equipment does not require blowing up a giant crater to be able to get lower than where you currently are.
They could have explained it away of like the material the machines we have can only go this deep, and we want to actually get this deep, so we have to blow a crater to get lower so that we can get to the core where we want to get. They could have clearly explained that, but they really didn't. I understand what you're suggesting.
I would go one step further and say the entire point of them being on that comet is so that Reed and Mayweather can be in danger.
Yes.
What ends up happening is the surface of the comet where the shuttlecraft is weakens to the point where when the shuttlecraft tries to take off, it falls into a cavern. It falls down into a chasm where it can't take off for reasons that are never clearly explained.
Yep.
And because it can't take off, the Enterprise has to navigate itself directly above and use their grappling hooks to try and pull it out, like effectively pulling a fish out of a underwater cave. And surprise, surprise, that's not easy to do. Enter the Vulcans, who have a tractor beam, can do this much easier. The entire point of this is to reach a point of critical mass where Archer has to swallow his pride and accept the invitation of help from the Vulcans. It is a good goal for the storytelling of the episode. It is a good goal that the plot line has followed Archer reaching a tipping point with Vanek, where he's just like, you guys are full of crap. You won't leave us alone. Get off my ship. And then having to accept the help of that person. That is a good turn in the plot.
Mhm.
Using this device of the ship being in trouble, there are so many things about it that rub me the wrong way. The biggest one being the entire reason they've sent a shuttle pod down to get that material is because the material is too deep in the comet to be able to use the transporters.
Mhm.
They are on the surface. They are in trouble on the surface. They could transport them out of the shuttle pod. They could transport them off the surface of the planet before they even need to get to the shuttle pod. The moment that they realized, oh, you guys are in trouble because the sun's going to come up, they could have beamed them up right then.
Yep.
And just left the shuttle pod.
Yep.
None of this makes sense from a perspective of like good dilemma for anybody to be in.
And the fact that Reed would have pushed it that close to the danger point makes no sense. It's like, when Mayweather fell and hurts himself and it slows them down to get to the shuttle, at that moment they would have beamed them up. It's like there's this entire plot is just, like I said, dumb. It was, like you said, it was there for one reason and one reason only, to perpetuate the character development stuff that they wanted to do between Archer and the Vulcan ship. And it's like sloppy storytelling to achieve that goal when they could have done it in a much better way. I
even had trouble with Mayweather gets hurt. Of course, somebody always gets hurt. It's always like, oh, I've twisted my ankle and now I can barely walk. And only at that moment is it depicted that for some reason they have landed the shuttle pod like a mile away. Like, at what point was it revealed that the shuttlecraft is so far away that they are in danger of not making it back? They are told you have about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And they don't make it back in time.
Yeah.
At what point was it revealed that they were so far away from the shuttle pod? Because it's depicted as they land and it looked for all the world like they walked about 100 yards and started digging.
Yeah. But then to get away, it looks like they're running a mile.
It's almost as if at that moment Reed was like, well, we haven't really seen a whole lot of the comet, so why don't we take the scenic route? With a hobbled Mayweather, they finally make it back to the shuttle pod and end up having this disaster. Anyway, the Vulcans end up helping. Everything is fine. There is a moment of reconciliation where the Vulcans leave and Archer is left with his crew intact and everybody is happy. The final conclusion of the moment with T'Pol and Tucker is revealed as T'Pol basically indirectly, when Tucker comes to her and says, are you getting your stuff together so you can leave? And she says, no, there's no reason. That's the moment where her decision has been made clear. She's going to stay on the Enterprise. Her relationship to her betrothed is going to end. The insult to the groom's family will be what it is. And she is going to do what she wants to do, as opposed to what her heritage would tell her she has to do. And then the episode ends with what I think is a very nice callback to something earlier in the episode. Very early in the episode, Tucker is excitedly digging into a slice of pecan pie. Mm-hmm. And he invites T'Pol to join him at the table as he's eating, and because invites her.
They're both having trouble sleeping.
They're both having trouble sleeping. Yeah. And he invites her to join him with a slice of pie. And she basically rebuffs it as it's nothing but sugar. There's no point to eating something like that. Now, at the end of the episode,
his response is basically, it's comfort food and it makes me relaxed and it'll probably help me sleep, is basically his response.
So she, at the end of the episode, ends in isolation in her quarters, in the conversation between Trip and T'Pol, where she's asking his advice. She asks him to her quarters, which has never happened before. He sees her quarters, and it is clear that this is her refuge from the humans around her. So this is a place of isolation for her. Now, at the very end of the episode, we see her in her quarters again. She's completely isolated. She's going into a meditative practice, and sitting in front of her with her meditative candles is a slice of pecan pie. I think two things at the same time. One is, I think it is an absolutely lovely callback to the earlier scene. The sense of this is comfort food. There's no point, but it tastes good and makes you feel good. And here she is with this slice. My question to you and my question to the listeners is, where did this slice of pie come from? Did she go and get a slice of pie because she's now maybe opening a part of herself to interacting and experiencing a little bit more of the humanity around her? Or did Trip send her this piece of pie? I like both.
Yeah, I like both interpretations of that.
But both of them, there's nothing in the scene to indicate one way or the other. But which do you think is the one that you would like?
My interpretation when I watched it in the moment was she got it for herself, because she had asked Trip in that scene where she asked for his opinion, and he's basically saying, what do you want? And she's arguing with him, and he says, why do you even ask me here? And he dumps that last bit of information on her that just like, you got to think about yourself too, and walks out. I think for me, she got it on her own because she actually now understands what he was trying to say to her in that scene, and is growing trust in his advice. And so as part of his advice, when they were in the dining hall, of him saying, this is comfort food, sometimes you just need to do something for yourself. I think she's taking that to the next logical step of like, maybe I do need a little comfort in my life. So I think
letting
she's
a little curiosity into her experience.
Exactly. So she's opening up her human side a little bit, and she's listening to Trip a little bit more. So for me, that it wasn't Trip giving it to her, it's her, we're seeing her open up a little bit. And by her opening up, it's her opening up to Trip specifically.
I'm interested in what our listeners have to say about this, whether they think that it was a gift from Trip or whether this was her going out and getting it. I remain on the fence. I think both of them have tremendous appeal.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said, that there is a really strong component to say, like, this is about her internal latching on to some of this experience. Because one of the biggest things about this episode that I think did work, and I'm with you, I'm on the fence about whether it was a good episode or not, but there are character moments that stick with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things is, this is the episode where T'Pol truly becomes the previous episode, the Andorian incident, where she has to come to terms with the fact that Vulcans have been spying, and she has to turn over the images of the spy rig to the Andorian. That's one big step forward. But this is the next one, which is she is now committed to the experience of the mission.
Yep.
Of the Enterprise, which is separate from recognition that her people have been breaking a treaty.
Yep.
That's one hard truth. This is a personal truth. It's not connected to the larger experience of Vulcanhood. It's her experience of Vulcanhood. And that's why I think that this episode, that's one of the places where this episode really works.
Can I just bring up two other things, very small things that I think they're very nuanced things that I want to bring up here. And they're both about Archer and his scene with the school kids. Scott Bakula's performance of Archer has always been very stilted and stiff. And I loved the portrayal of the school kids moment where he's recording the message, because he goes to like
11
with his awkwardness, because he's clearly very nervous about talking to these kids. And it's one of those, I remember when I watched it originally, this was the first time I realized, oh wait, Scott Bakula is not doing like a bad portrayal of this character. That's just the character. And it's funny to see him just ratchet up that stiffness and trying to be Mr. Proper to a very awkward level. And I just love that portrayal of, it shows that he's doing a very nuanced performance where you may not think so at first. And this was the first time I recognized that. And the other thing is just the production design of the show, because when he's having a discussion with T'Pol in his quarters and he's pacing, he has to keep ducking underneath the bulkheads.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. It was just like, okay, this is the first real Earth ship, and it feels like a submarine. It feels very confined and small and cramped. And it's like, it's so cramped, he can't even pace in his quarters without having to stuck, or he's going to crack his head against the bulkhead. I
was going to say that's the perfect
that
balance of the sort of stiffness you were talking about.
Yeah.
That stiffness in the experience, the lived experience of the ship, he's learning how to become more fluid.
Yeah.
Because he has to literally bend underneath that bulkhead, and he does it without looking like he's having to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So it's a nice moment where it's indicative of he's becoming familiar enough with the ship that he knows where the bulkhead is. He's probably bumped his head a number of times.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah. The back and forth between Trip and T'Pol is some wonderful relationship building in this episode, and a big shout out to Phlox as usual.
He's always great.
The character is masterfully portrayed. And the scene where they're responding to the school kids' letters, Phlox goes off on a rambling response to can bacteria live in space, and has to be cut off.
Yeah.
And is clearly embarrassed by the fact that, I was rambling. It's a moment where he looks around and is, I'm sorry. It's a lovely character moment for him. And I also wanted to give a tip of the hat to William Ute, who played Captain Vanek, who, as you mentioned, I really liked that portrayal. He is so disdainful at that dinner party scene, and he's doing some tremendous work with the job of not showing emotion. So hats off to him. So Matt, I understand you've got a deeper dive to take us on this week.
Yes.
And what's that dive look like?
It's about the Comet, how we both just railed on how the Comet was the stupidest part of the storyline here and was just a device to get a couple characters into danger. The thing I liked about it, though, was them landing on a comet and doing space exploration on the comet to discover kind of origins of where it came from and things like that. And Brandon Braga, when they were doing this episode, he referred to this as he was always continually trying to push the limits of what the series creative staff could do. Because portraying landing on a comet on a TV show at the time this was made would, of course, be very difficult and expensive to pull off. And the staff writer and the science advisor, Andre Bormanis, who worked on this episode, said they went out of their way to get the scientific details correct about the comet. But of course, they didn't limit themselves to that, because they always, of course, the story has to come first. So if they have to take some liberties, they take some liberties. But they were trying to get this as accurate as they could. And there's a quote that I found, which was from writer Chris Black, when he asked the production crew if they could turn stage 9 into the surface of a comet. He was surprised and impressed when the response was, "Yeah, when you need it by." I just love that. But then taking that and pulling it into the real world, it's really cool to think that we as humans have actually already done this, which is just insanely cool. It was in 2004. The European Space Agency launched the Rosetta mission, which was a space probe that traveled through the galaxy, and through the solar system. And as it was going through the system, it passed by Earth, Mars, and several asteroids, taking close pictures and readings of those planets and objects. And in 2014, it successfully landed its lander, which is called the Philae, onto the surface of the comet to, of course, take readings and samples and do all this kind of stuff. So it was a successful mission from that point of view. And one of the things I loved about the lander was one of the things it had 2 grappling hooks that when it was going to get close and it was coming in, it was going to shoot these harpoons into the surface so that when it would land, it wouldn't bounce back off. And they ended up not having to use the harpoons, which is even cooler. It's kind of they were able to successfully land without the harpoons. But it was not a complete success because it landed in a crevice, however you want to say that. And it couldn't get enough sunlight to recharge its systems from the solar panels. So it only worked for about 2 days before it died. But they did get some readings.
That's sad.
Yes.
So it was lonely little robot on the asteroid.
Yeah. So even though the whole mission wasn't as a raging success as they were hoping for, it still was successful because they did get readings. They did successfully land on the comet. They learned a lot. And one of the things I thought that was fascinating was the isotropic signature of the water vapor from the comet was determined to be substantially different from the water that's found on Earth. So one of the things they discovered was this comet would not have been the type of comet that would have seeded the Earth with water. And it was basically completely alien from what we have on our planet. It's like, that is so, I don't know. I get really nerdy.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
so cool.
It's really astounding.
Yeah. So
and that
was the deep dive I was kind of hoping to dive into here, which was just the comet exploration. We've actually done what they did on the show, which is just kind of cool.
And I read something similar about the science advisor trying to work very close with the production crew to make things as realistic as possible and scientifically really like depict things accurately. And this episode was nominated for an Emmy. It actually lost out to the pilot episode of Enterprise, which beat them out for visual effects. And you can see it in the episode. The portrayal of the comet is really intriguing, and the effect as the sunlight comes and begins to melt the ice, and it turns quickly into shattering and then falling away and turning back to liquid. And you think about a body in space that is going to freeze and cool. It's going to freeze and heat up to those extremes so quickly. And it's so dangerous for them to be on it. And I think that is well portrayed. The thing that I immediately laughed at was like, oh, let's go to this comet. And of course, it's a comet. It's like, it's not a planet. It's not a moon. It's a comet. And they land on it, and it has enough gravity that they just walk around like normal. Yes. And I was just like, all the scientific stuff that you put into this episode to make sure that like you were trying to make it look right.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even do the typical movie
bounding steps,
simply moving slower. Like, showing people having to like, don't forget to tether yourself to the ship. And we can't like dig into the snow without pushing ourselves up off the comet. Like little things like that would have been nice. I was like, I couldn't even explain, like, thank goodness for these anti-grav belts that we have that make us like Star Trek, the original series animated show, has an episode where they put on what they call gravity belts that allow them to walk on the surface of a planet normally.
Right.
I'm like, the cartoon did that. Like, can't you guys? Come on.
Star Trek First Contact, when they walk out in the ship, they walk out on the surface of the ship, and you see the little lights on their boots light up, and you hear ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And it's like, okay, I understand. They got magnetic boots.
I understand.
It's like, there's something so simple they could have done that would have helped. But
So as we get ready to sign off, next episode is going to be titled Civilization. Matt, do you have any guesses as to what the plot of Civilization is going to be?
I think it's going to be about a group of people that are living together in some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Civilization? Yeah.
So a quick reminder to everybody, what does the pie represent? Let us know what you think. And for bonus points, let us know if you were to give somebody an important piece of pie.
What pie would it be?
Would it be pecan pie?
Yeah.
Is pecan pie the appropriate important pie? Or is there a different pie that's better? Let us know. Matt, before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to remind our listeners about that you have going on?
Just check out my channel, Undecided with Matt Farrell. I'm talking about a lot of cool tech like modular homes and how they can get to net zero really easily. Fungus and how it might replace plastic. So check out Undecided with Matt Farrell.
As for me, you can check out my website. It's seanfarrell.com. And you can look for my books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or at your local bookstore or your local library. They are available in many places. And if you go searching, I'm sure you'll find them. And if you find them, I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any comments or corrections, please let us know. You can find the contact information in the podcast notes. If you're on YouTube and watching our smiling faces, you can just leave a comment directly below the video. Thanks to everybody for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe. Please don't forget to like. And please don't forget to share widely with friends, strangers, and friends of strangers. We'll talk to you next time.